All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for showing up this morning. To officially welcome back Kelly Krauskopf as President of Basketball Business Operations for the Indiana.
What if the one individual who has the capacity to elevate the WNBA to unprecedented heights is also the one who the league's establishment is secretly trying to destroy? Millions of fans think that, despite the fact that it can appear to be a deluded fantasy. A series of shocking on-court occurrences, bitter off-court statements, and other factors have made Caitlin Clark the focus of a clandestine battle. And a callous, brutal choice made by the highest authorities. The reality of this evolving. The narrative is far darker and more intricate than anyone could have imagined, revealing a league at odds with its own success. Caitlin Clark's selection by the Indiana Fever with the first overall pick was praised as a historic moment that would alter women's professional basketball's trajectory. She wasn't your typical talented rookie. She was a cultural force of nature and a rating supernova who had drastically changed college audiences and record books. Her competitions attracted more viewers than MLB playoff games and Stanley Cup finals. She was the golden goose, forcing the league to transition from commercial aircraft to private charters on her own. The chosen one. For years, veterans had demanded this reform. Secondary market tickets were increasing to previously unheard-of levels, and stadia that had a ton of empty seats were now selling out in a matter of minutes. Caitlin Clark's influence was immediate, tangible, and sincere. Everything was set up for a beautiful coronation, a hero's professional debut that would improve the sport overall. However, the greeting was replaced by a gauntlet as she was cruelly and relentlessly baptized by fire. Mat that had been taken out from under her. From her first game, it was horrifyingly clear that this would not be an easy transition. The level of toughness was entirely different. Defenders weren't merely taking. They were also bigger, more powerful, and faster. They were sending a message with every push, bump, and hard screen. But this was more than just a strong, skilled defense, it was so personal. It was a concentrated, ruthless campaign that seemed to must have been meticulously designed to punish her, restrict her, and get her to question her place in this league. And that silent message was going to be delivered in the most obvious, unquestionable way possible. Sparking a wave of controversy that would disclose the gloom and tear back the curtain. Mash the league's nasty underbelly. The hits she was taking on the court were just the start of the worst story. It happened during a furious match against. Everyone in the sports world knew that something was gravely, deeply wrong with the Chicago Sky. While fighting for position, it wasn't a difficult box out under the rim or a hard screen. Kennedy Carter unleashed a vicious. Carter attacked Caitlin Clark with a blindside shoulder check that was inappropriate for a basketball game. A cheap, cowardly, and blatant shot that was thrown far from the ball forced Clark to commit a foul in addition to plummet brutally to the ground. As soon as the play went viral, there was a global outcry of criticism. This was not a welcome to the league moment, rather, it was a deliberate and spiteful statement. Effort to cause harm. In addition to her lover Angel Reese's evident, happy jubilation from the sidelines. Carter's haughty unwillingness to answer any questions about the episode that followed only served to stoke the flames. The league's long-standing enmity and resentment, which many had thought were seething beneath the surface, were exposed by this one terrible incident, which eventually came to symbolize everything that was wrong. The WNBA's pathetic initial response, a simple common foul, taught fans everything they needed to know. It was only elevated to a flagrant one following harsh public condemnation. The league's biggest star would not be protected. Caitlin Clark was alone. Multiple players from a single squad participated in this disagreement. The whole league experienced the phenomenon. Veterans who thought she hadn't organized the project after paying her dues or earning her stripes, but there is a far more horrifying tale. Emerged from her own locker room, a location no one wanted to believe, while everyone else was talking about the league's cowardice and the foul. As the season progressed, a highly disturbing pattern that was unthinkable for professional. Ignore internet detectives, basketball gurus, and former players. Possibly the best shooter in the world, Caitlin Clark would frequently call for the ball while standing wide open on the perimeter with her hands raised, only to be totally ignored by her peers. The recording was undeniable. Clark stood by himself. 3 points would be assured if passes were forced into players who were double covered in the paint. The Indiana Fever's on-court friendship was no longer just peculiar, it was broken, shattered, and sometimes deliberately undermined. Frustrated body language and glances at the bench. The group gained notoriety for its intensive, silent meetings. A horrifying and progressively plausible conspiracy hypothesis was originated from the conversation that exploded on social media. Her team was deliberately limiting her in order to keep her stats low and degrade her. Were they jealous of the unprecedented amount of media attention, the massive multi-million-dollar a trademark shoe was part of the Nike contract, and it was undeniable that a 22-year-old rookie was become the focal point of the franchise's identity. These concerns persisted in spite of seasoned star Aaliyah Boston's mysterious post-game comments. Her answers to questioning from media regarding the seeming lack of chemistry were often brief, evasive, and full of business jargon, indicating a deeper irritation. She was unable to communicate in public. The narrative was rapidly evolving from a simple narrative of a rookie struggling to cope with the horrifying possibility of an internal uprising. Were the athletes who were supposed to be both her opponents and her allies who are purposefully sabotaging this generational potential? This internal strife created the perfect storm, a disorderly and suspicious environment. The animosity wasn't confined to the floor, as the powerful old guard in the league was about to give an even more direct, official, damaging message. The league's most respectable speakers were spreading it through the media. Both current and former veteran actors could begin a clandestine but persistent effort to reduce her significance and normalize the brutal violence she was subjected to. The most well-known instance happened from WNBA legend Diana Taurasi, who, even before Clark was recruited, cruelly predicted her eventual reality. A comment that, looking back, appears to be more of a threat or ominous prediction than an objective analysis, conveniently ignoring the fact that no rookie in the history of professional sports has ever entered in a league where they were under constant pressure. Other athletes and pundits justified the relentless cruelty by blatantly dismissing it as standard operating procedure for any novice. The conversation inevitably turned into more deceptive and intricate than talking about the incredibly sensitive dynamics of a white player rising to prominence in a league with a sizable black population. The remarkable contributions made by the black women who had worked in relative obscurity for years in order to build the WNBA from the ground up were unfairly and inadvertently destroyed, as many rightly pointed out, by the media's relentless savior narrative. This resulted in a perfect storm of professional envy, cultural conflict, and righteous indignation. It became an ideological conflict between the novel developments, which signaled a significant shift in the financial and cultural climate of sports, and the old generation, who believed that their tremendous accomplishments were being mercilessly disregarded. She was a tidal wave of hype that threatened to destroy everything, not the rising tide that draws all boats to them. Millions of admirers would be shocked, perplexed, and totally duped by what they had worked so hard to build. Decision made at the highest level of the sport as a result of this long-simmering, unresolved conflict regarding to become an official, unassailable policy. The committee assigned to represent the United States of America on the global stage offered the most damning proof that there were robust institutional forces that deliberately opposed Caitlin Clark rather than a competing athlete or an envious comrade. Caitlin Clark was left out of the USA Olympic team for the Paris Games in a choice that went against every logic, including financial, competitive, and otherwise. The judgment was incomprehensible and shocked the whole world of international athletics. This was the most popular, talked about, and watched basketball player in the world. A woman who lately showed that she could give a niche sport Super Bowl level audience. She was also informed that she wasn't competent enough to serve as a reserve. The committee's formal defenses were flimsy, blatant, and disrespectful. They brought up her alleged lack of senior national team experience and her ambiguous desire for team cohesion, despite the fact that some of the players who did make the squad had less experience or were experiencing statistically worse seasons. This was the most effective kind of gatekeeping. The official word from the ivory tower of American basketball was, "You are not one of us. You are not invited to our exclusive event because we don't care how well known you are, how many fans you have, or how much money you make." Club. It was a terrible, self-defeating decision that felt like a formal declaration of war on the future of its own sport because it was clearly driven by politics, pride, and personal passions. Everyone was watching the Indiana Fever's front office as the sports media and the globe went bananas. They had just been publicly humiliated by their franchise player, their golden goose, and the sole source of their newfound importance on a worldwide scale. The globe eagerly awaited the Indiana Fever organization's response, which would reveal all of their true allegiances. Return, with their star player at the center of a global storm. Fans, commentators, and sponsors all expected a fierce. They anticipated a public declaration of unwavering support for their player's impassioned defense. A disturbed child and a critical press statement criticizing the Olympic Committee's ridiculous decision. Rather, they encountered a soul-crushing, purposeful, and deafening silence. Fever. The WNBA season The only corporate-approved factors are Caitlyn's bright future and the importance of the long term. Remarks made by President Lynn Dunn and the other frontline employees. There was no emotion, no rage. In that dreadful moment, the terrible decision from the video's title was finally revealed. There was no fire and no struggle at all. Of inaction. There was not a single hard foul or a controversial roster snub. The Indiana Fever made the difficult, deliberate choice to not defend their most valuable asset rather than advocating for the person who was monetarily. In order to avoid upsetting the league's supporters of their team's comeback, they chose to play the political game. Powerful and bitter elite. It was a heartbreaking betrayal, a clear declaration to Clark that she was not a player to be protected and encouraged, but rather a commodity, an asset to be managed and made money from. They enthusiastically filled their arena. They sold her shirts by the truckload to the rafters, yet when it came time to protect her from the well-established old guard, this heartless financial analysis showed that even her personal organization was willing to briefly endanger her health in order to maintain their shaky place inside the league's ruthless power structure. The Olympic exclusion and its deliberate quiet exposed a terrible truth about the cruelty of professional athletics. A fundamental conflict between two. The rigid established culture is one of the powerful opposing forces at the center of the whole vast fight. The unstoppable money machine, Caitlin Clark, whose rookie salary is an astonishingly low $76,000, which she most likely recovers for the league in a single quarter of play. She is in command of her own, potentially generating tens of millions of dollars for the WNBA overall. Since she plays for the other team, teams that once played in small, claustrophobic college gyms are now packed 20,000 seats. NBA arenas. The league's national television rights contract is almost entirely due to her involvement. It is anticipated to rise in value from a pitiful $60 million to potentially over $240 million. She is the most valuable asset in the history of women's professional sports by any conceivable financial measure. Nevertheless, she encounters a deeply embedded culture and an older group of executives and veterans who are vehemently opposed to the radical change she represents. They view her rapid rise as a personal slight and a challenge to their established hierarchy and their arduous past instead of as a gift to the game the league is presently involved in. It appears to be essentially reluctant to embrace the cultural shift in a confusing, self-destructive dichotomy. It always accompanies Caitlin Clark, despite its strong desire for the money, importance, and widespread visibility she offers.